From studios at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, this is Fourth and State. In this edition, Fox News analyst Juan Williams chats with James Causey on race and on the dangers of what he calls the culture of failure.
I'm James E. Causey, editorial writer, columnist, and blogger with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel editorial board. Today, I have with me Juan Williams, who will be honored tonight at the Milwaukee Press Club. Juan Williams, thank you for joining us.
Fine. Good to be with you, James.
Great. We have a very hot topic going on right now with the recall elections going on between Governor Scott Walker and Tom Barrett. What do you make of this race?
Well, I think it's a proxy fight for some big issues that are becoming dominant in the country since the 2010 midterm elections, in specific newly elected Republican governors who came in that midterm cycle, who have pressed a Republican agenda in their states. And in large part, this is an agenda that I think is born of antagonism towards President Obama and the Democrats as having controlled government, and the people who support the Democrats, in specific, the biggest source of money for Democrats in the country, unions. Mm-hmm. And if you look around the country, if you look at, for example, Ohio, Indiana, as well as Wisconsin, you'll see Republican governors who have tried to take on the unions. Now, in Ohio, with Governor Kasich, it didn't work as well, and he was rebuffed. Mm-hmm. Here in Wisconsin, it has been a struggle, but Walker has been successful in terms of his initiatives, and I think the unions have created a storm and tried to fight back, and that's led to this recall effort that you cite in asking the question. What you've seen then is an influx of money from around the country to Walker, mm-hmm. from people who support this agenda, taking on the unions. And then to the contrary, you've seen an influx of money, although they wish there was more, to the unions for fighting against the idea of ending collective bargaining specific for teachers in the public sector.
So does this come down to who has the most money?
Well, I think there's some other elements. I don't think you would have a recall here unless voters had some angst and upset about the idea that their politics have become so antagonistic, so polarized. I don't think of Wisconsin as historically having this kind of political feuding so dominant. I don't think it's in character for the state's politics. But I think that right now it has become, as I say, especially for conservatives, mm-hmm. a stand-in for all that they are arguing about. And, by extension, even something I care deeply about, school choice. Right. Suddenly it becomes an argument about, well, how do you hold teachers accountable? How do you improve quality of schools? Here's Walker trying to say to teachers, do your job. All of this then somehow gets conflated into this argument about Walker taking on the collective bargaining rights of teachers in Wisconsin. And from the union perspective, again, it's critical for them to have some success here to show that unions have not been emasculated and are not incapable of defending themselves when they feel under attack. You
mentioned school choice and holding teachers accountable. Is there a great example or across the nation of a district doing just that, holding teachers accountable, and it working?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, right now there are big fights, I would say, big fights taking place. Chicago, your neighbor, is one of them. Mm-hmm. Chicago, where you have a Democratic mayor in Rahm Emanuel, the former White House chief of staff, you would not think that he would come into office and immediately engage in a fight with the teachers union because, again, to reiterate, teachers unions have been such major funders of Democratic candidates and causes. But there is Rahm Emanuel, and I would add in the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, another Democrat. There are other Democrats around the country who have said, we think that the poor quality of big city education, especially for minority children, is such a critical issue at this juncture that we are going to challenge the teachers unions. And so in the case of Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, he wants to extend the school day. He wants to extend the school year, in fact. He's willing to pay more. Now, there's an effort to hold teachers accountable by saying, I want to also pay teachers more if those teachers are successful. Right. And, that kind of example is one that resonates now deeply across a nation that's struggling to enact school reform.
Changing gears here a bit, you've been critical of black leaders in the past, and you once said that America creates that because of this, because black leaders have not done what they needed to do, that it creates a culture of failure. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, this really comes out of a book I wrote, James, called Enough. Mm-hmm. And the subtitle includes that notion, culture of failure, and what we can do about it as Americans, the culture of failure in black America. But the point is, and actually, you know what, some of it starts right here in Milwaukee.
What do you mean?
Bill Causey had been visiting Milwaukee and told me a story about meeting some kids who just wanted to meet the famous comedian.
Right.
And he said to them, you know, what did you learn today in school? And the kids were absolutely incapable of answering the question. And then went on to, you know, just try to figure out what's going on with these kids and the absent dads, no one at home, no one who asked them that question, what did you do today in school? What did you learn today in school? And for Bill Causey, the failure of schools is part of this larger culture of failure. Causey, as you know, on the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, gave a speech in which he said, you know, we have too many young people who aren't graduating from high school. We have too many people living in poverty, mm-hmm. especially minority children, something I think people here in Milwaukee know a lot about. Mm-hmm. He talked about high levels of incarceration of black and brown men in our country, and said, why is it that we don't address these issues? What are we celebrating when we celebrate Brown v. Board of Education 50 years after the fact in 2004 without paying attention to these ongoing crises in black America? And as he put it, there are a lot of people, especially the young black kids, who not only don't care about Brown versus education, but don't care about education in general, which has historically been the sort of, you know, greatest legacy of all African American struggles. That we are a people that we're dedicated to the idea that we want to be educated and struggle to gain the right to attend schools, to learn to read, and all the rest. So when we talk about this culture of failure that is, I think, having a terrible grip on black America today, you know, you could talk about things like, I'll offer you an example, James, you know, the drug epidemic, especially crack, as it's impacted black communities. You say, well, where's the NAACP? Where's the Urban League? Where's major black leadership? Mm-hmm. You know, people like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton, or any of these folks who are identified as black American leaders. Where are they leading any marches against the drug dealers? I cite a case in the book of a black woman who, you know, called the cops when she could see the drug deals taking place out of the window of her home, and you know the drug dealers then retaliated against her, finally burned the house, killed her entire family.
Wow.
You know, where's the black church community saying, you know, we're standing with this woman and with families against this kind of intimidation and murder? Mm-hmm. You don't see it. Where's the black community and black leadership when it comes to saying, well, wait a second, why is there an acceptance of criminal culture of saying, hey, you know what? It's not cool for these drug dealers to take a house in the black community, drive down values for the residential real estate, drive out business community, hurt our communities in general, offer these terrible examples to our young black men. Why is there a culture of failure when you look at TV and what you see the image of black men, something that hurts me because I'm a dad? My sons see images of black men as a lot of attitude, a lot of tattoos, the pants down, or talking about, hey, you know, I got muscles and I've killed so many people, or I've been cut so many times, or this is my shiny car with the hubcap spinning, and I got these hoes and bitches talking about black women in this way. And you just say to yourself, well, wait a minute, how did this culture become so dominant in black America, and how did this become the role model for what a black man is supposed to look like? Just this week I was dealing with a group called, the group is focused on fatherhood, or lack of fathers,
right,
in general in America, but in specific in black America, when you have 70% of black children born to single moms. Mm-hmm. And the absence of fathers is just a critical issue. Again, when you look at family breakdown, when you say, where is the black leadership? Where is the church leadership? Where is the business leadership in the black community speaking to these issues? You come up empty. And I think that's a terrible indictment for our era.
How do you change it?
Well, I think you have to speak to it. See, I think there's the reaction that Bill Cosby got, and again, I would just urge people to take a look at the book. It's called Enough.
Okay.
But the reaction, as you might recollect, is that Bill Cosby was indicted by many black people for airing dirty laundry,
Right.
being a cranky old man, not understanding in the minds of some black intellectuals that there are systemic issues, structural issues, that are the real weight on black America, and instead focusing on personal behavior. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, this is terrible, which is why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to say, hey, wait a second, it's not one or the other. Yes, there's structural issues to be addressed about. For example, if you look at a city like Milwaukee, blue-collar jobs moving out. But at the same time, you have to address the idea that, well, you know what, people adjust, and winners, successful communities, have to adjust to changing times and circumstances. And part of that is understanding that there is some personal responsibility, that you have to say families are important. Mm-hmm. And children are important. You have to say schools are important and education is important. You have to deliver this message very clearly, and you can't just turn away and act as if, well, somebody else is responsible, or the white man's responsible for all the problems in our community.
Right. Okay, what role does race play in all of this? Because you can't ignore the role of race.
Right.
How big of an issue is race today in fixing these problems? You can't talk about these problems unless you address race, correct?
No, you can talk about them without addressing race, in the sense that you can say, this is our community mm-hmm. among black people, mm-hmm. and we want to strengthen our communities. And it's not just about moving out, to some other suburb or something like that, but hey, here's what we can do in order to strengthen ourselves.
Right.
And I think it starts with family. Here's what we can do to strengthen our families and our neighborhoods, the street we live on, etc. If you want to have the larger discussion about race, it can be difficult, and you can say to people, there's a terrible history of racial, obviously, slavery, mm-hmm. Legal segregation and discrimination in our society, and it's ongoing. We still have so much to do on that front. But I wouldn't get lost in that discussion to the point, then, of ignoring what can be accomplished with people who are of good heart and who want success for their communities and who are willing to move beyond the racial divisions that persist. But believe me, if you were talking to black folks from the 1930s or the 1950s or even the 1970s and comparing the level of everything from integration to business success in black America today, they'd say, you're saying you can't do anything because of race? Let's be real.
Great, great. Well, again, thank you. This was a very deep topic, and it's one that requires more conversation. And thank you for joining us.
Mr. Causey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.